Welcome to Far East Wargaming, bringing you another Heresy Thursday. I'm Richard, your host, and once again with me is Jason.
Hello, everyone.
So this week we're doing another Legion review, and we've selected the 5th Legion, the White Scars.
Yes, everybody's favorite space Mongolians, Genghis Khan, the nod to China. It's a really, really awesome Legion in terms of the fluff, the models, and when you see a painted force on the table, it is absolutely beautiful. Uh, Scares a lot of people off, unfortunately, because of the painting, but that's kind of a separate subject. It's a really, really nice army and has some very unique play style and units to it.
Yes, I do love the White Scars, and when they're on the field, they are quite impressive. And you're right, in the past, they've actually been quite an expensive army to own because you always think of lots of bikes, lots of scimitar jetbikes, and the daunting task of painting white. But GW has actually made it very nice for us nowadays because they've released the plastic jetbikes, which has been a godsend for many legions, but also the new way to paint white with contrast, Apothecary White, has made it rather simple now.
Yeah, absolutely. There's now a lot of different ways to do white, as you mentioned, with contrast or other techniques, and plastic is definitely much appreciated. I think the other thing that we'll get into when we start to talk about the rules and how they've kind of evolved from 1.0 is the rights of war now allow you to a little bit more flexibility, whereas in 1.0 you were very heavy on bikes if you wanted to take advantage of the Legion rules. Now they've got some tricks up their sleeve that can actually allow you to do infantry heavy White Scars army should you choose.
Yes, and that's always been a vulnerability of the White Scars. They were looked to feel very one-dimensional, but now we've got some greater options. I think it's just nice, especially with the Age of Darkness being infantry heavy. White Scar players can still get use out of that box.
Yes, indeed. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. Why don't we dive into the rules a little bit? And I'll kick things off. I'll talk about the Legion rule that's unique to the Legion, of course. This one is called Swift of Action, and it's pretty simple, actually. All models with the special rule get +1 to their movement characteristic. And whenever there's a roll to determine which player will take the first turn, or, the important word there is or, seize the initiative, the controlling player of an army with whose primary detachment has this rule may roll an additional dice and discard the lowest dice before determining the result. So this is a two-parter. The first part is pretty short and sweet, +1 movement. What this means is your basic infantry dudes, as long as they're not movement 6, they're going to now all of a sudden become movement 8. So your TAC Marines, your Tartarus Termes, a lot of your models get to that critical movement 8, which is useful because that means you also get a +1 bonus to your charge distance. So that is going to make for a very fast-moving army. The second part of this is also, it's really about who gets to go first. And a White Scars player definitely wants to go first because of the bikes, because of probably less shooting, as we'll see later in the Rights of War. But what this basically means is either for the roll to go first or the seize the initiative. And let's face it, in most cases, it's going to be the roll to go first. The White Scars player gets to roll an extra dice, which means a higher opportunity for them to get that crucial first turn as they need it. Not the most complex of Legion rules, another one that's useful all the time. And I think in the right hands and with some canny positioning and unit choices, you have an army that can get around pretty quickly and can get some charges off when they need to.
Yes, they're one of the Legion special rules that is always going to have a use, and you shouldn't underestimate that +1 to the movement characteristic for all of your Legion, because it is a +1 to their charge, and it makes them the same movement as a Contemptor, and makes a Contemptor bigger. There, it's just a very versatile rule that could catch a lot of people by surprise, and I think more than one person has been caught by surprise by that +1 from an infantry model on their charge distance. So I do like it. I think it's about time that they got something very useful. I can't actually remember what their rule was in the first edition.
It was more movement kind of bonuses. It didn't, I think, have the two-part rule about the seizing the initiative or the going first, but it was making them also quite fast. I think the other useful insight into this rule is it says models. It doesn't say infantry. So actually your vehicles get a bonus to this as well. So theoretically, this gives you more opportunities for your transports or for your shooty things like Sicarns to get a little bit additional movement, or your sabers, or Any of your vehicles also can take advantage of that extra 1-inch movement, which could come in handy in certain situations.
Yes. And also, talking about movement and flexibility, the White Scar's advanced reaction, chasing the wind, really follows along with that theme. So, this reads, as with any advanced reaction, it can only be used once per battle, and when an enemy unit ends their movement phase within 12 inches of a friendly model, the White Scars player can react, and it triggers a move for every unit of the White Scars within 12 inches. So, and then they also do not suffer from, they suffer the normal penalties from difficult terrain, dangerous terrain, but they can activate their jump packs, but can't run. I like this because I think you'll see a lot more use out of it than you might initially believe, because it's a lot of units that could potentially move here, especially when aggressive armies are looking to get the charge off. It allows the White Scars player to move back and then take advantage of their need to charge.
Yes, I mean, you can use this in a lot of different ways. And to be perfectly honest, when I first read this advanced reaction, I was kind of like, meh. But then once I started to read it a few more times, see it in other bat reps and things like this, I realized just how powerful it can be. Because it triggers multiple units, you can, if you're smart with your positioning and the way that you have units supporting each other, you can have a bait unit to tease out a charge, or you can have a bait unit to trick an opponent into like a shooting attack only for that unit to then all of a sudden move somewhere else and potentially out of line of sight. So there's a lot of different ways to work this advanced reaction. It does require, I think, a little bit more thinking on your part as the White Scars player, and the way you position your models, the units, the way you run them together. But in Heresy, and especially with the new Chthonian missions at 4 turns, anything that makes you faster or anything that gets you around the table quicker, I mean, it's going to be welcome, and it's going to be quite powerful, right? I mean, you can trigger this to go cap an objective. I mean, there's just so many different ways you can trigger this reaction. I like it. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, if you wait till the later turns and use this for additional movement, it could potentially be huge, because unlike the normal reactions during the movement phase, it isn't directional. It's not towards or away like the standard reactions. It's in any direction. So at the end, if you're being chased down the field and they're trying to chase you up for a charge, you're suddenly, potentially, depending on which unit it is, 16 inches further away, or 8 inches further away for just a standard infantry. I think it's can see a lot of use, and in different ways, both as a defensive and an offensive measure. So I do like it. It's one of the more strategic ones, but still extremely powerful if done right.
Yes, and World Eaters players beware, because if you happen to take one of their rights of war that forces you to make charges at units that are within distance, a smart White Scars player can really get you out of position, or you can really get your Death Star into an uncomfortable position or something like this. So definitely pay attention to that as well.
So moving on from the advanced reactions, we'll move on to the White Scars Warlord Traits. And they have 3: a loyalist version, a traitor-only version, and a standard version. So a pretty standard selection here. And if we start with the loyalist only, and that is heroes never die.
Yeah, this one is the Warlord gets stubborn along with the unit that he joins. But even more powerful is if the Warlord dies, any unit from the White Scars that can draw a line of sight to the Warlord, when he dies, they become fearless for the rest of the game, right? That could be massive, right? I mean, your entire army gaining fearless, they're not going to break from assaults. You don't have to worry about shooting morale checks. There's all different kinds of uses out of this. Now, again, it does require your warlords to die. So it is debatable whether or not you actually want that happening. But I could see this in a list where, like, you take a cheap HQ choice as your HQ, like your Delegatus, so that you can get, access to Master the Legion and whatnot. And you put him in a position where he dies relatively early in the game. That could be quite powerful. And when combined with, like, one of the White Scars' rights of war, you could even theoretically create a warlord that's not going to give up victory points upon his death, but then triggers this fearless through the army. This is really good, because in 2.0, fearless is more rare. Morale does play a more important part in the game. I like this one. I think it's useful. I'm not going to say it's auto take or auto include. I do feel like it's one of those warlord traits that are going to require you to kind of plan your army around it a little bit.
Yeah, the dual nature of this, how it has an effect whilst he's on the board, and potentially an even larger effect when he's removed from the board, is well, again, quite powerful. And if you're willing to be one of those who would sacrifice your warlord for the benefit of holding ground with the fearless rule, could play a key part, especially near the end of games when you need units no longer to flee or you're playing wars of attrition there. Yeah, strong. Also, this one has an extra reaction in the assault phase with the warlord still on the board there. Again, the phase second preferred, I'd say. Shooting phase reactions are still very much the preferred reaction for Horus Heresy.
Yeah, agree. I do like this one. I think again, it's a useful one. Again, it's just going to require some advanced planning on your army construction.
Now, the second Warlord trait, and this is the impartial one, so with no allegiance there, is more akin to what they used to have, and this one is called Born in the Saddle. And this is the Warlord and all models in this army with the special rule for the White Scars and a cavalry unit type. Ignore all difficult terrain and gain a 4+ invul on failed saves involved with dangerous terrain checks. Now, this is a bit like how they had it in the previous one, where the entire army as standard, I think, used to ignore difficult terrain here. This here is only if you choose the Born in the Saddle Warlord trait for your Warlord, so you get to take advantage of what they used to have as standard.
Yes, and this is if you're planning on running a lot of bikes, like actual outriders and your HQs on outrider bikes and things like this. This is going to be very, very useful for you. Ignoring difficult terrain and that is definitely useful. And the free 4-up invuln, where you normally don't get as many saves versus failed dangerous terrain checks, that could prove its worth as well. My only beef about this particular warlord trait is it's not useful all the time. It's not an auto include with every single White Scars list. Useful, but situational. So for me, I'd kind of give it like a mid-grade or a mid-tier in terms of warlord traits.
The one thing I'd say about this Warlord trait is if cavalry now are ignoring difficult terrain, does that mean they ignore the fact that difficult terrain makes it dangerous, and this dangerous terrain invulnerability is only for actual dangerous terrain, such as grav fields and things like this?
It's a good question. I don't recall that actually spelled out in the FAQ. I can see this kind of argued both ways, right? If you're ignoring difficult terrain, then it shouldn't trigger dangerous. But without going back to the main rulebook and clearly and carefully reading the way it's written out, I couldn't say. But it is definitely something to follow up on and debatable.
I think I'd be leaning on the side where if you're ignoring difficult terrain, because I think the rules reads something along the lines of treats all difficult terrain as dangerous terrain. So this is no longer difficult terrain, therefore not dangerous terrain. Again, I think it's a debate that we can have, or the different White Scars player will have in interpretations. And something that, sadly, I think we need GW to literally spell out word for word for us.
Yeah, but we're happy to also hear your thoughts on this. So in the comments, if you'd like to leave your interpretation of this or a reference to where this could be clarified, please go ahead and do so. We're more than happy to take a look at that.
Moving on, the last Warlord trait, the traitor-only Warlord trait, is another quite unique one, and I'd say actually very situational. And this Warlord trait is called the Forgotten Sons.
Yes, it does require you to take an allied detachment. So if you're playing an event or a game that doesn't allow actual allies, then this is completely useless. But if you're not, and you want to take allied Sons of Horus, then this could be useful because your Warlord auto passes pinning along with his unit and morale checks as long as they can draw a line of sight to one of the allied Sons of Horus units, armor-assuming models as well. You do get an extra bonus on this, which you get a second advanced reaction for your force. So not only do you get to use the White Scars advanced reaction, but you get to use the Death Dealer's advanced reaction. Even though you're White Scars, you get to use that in your force as well. So two advanced reactions in one force. That part is kind of nice. Both advanced reactions, of course, are still subject to the same limitation of only being able to be used once a game. And this Death Dealer's reaction, if you use it, it doesn't expand a reaction point. Again, this one is very situational. It requires the allies. It's nice. It's fluffy. It's kind of a throwback to in the books, the novels, when the White Scars and Sons of Horus were buddies at times, and joining together at different times, etc., etc. Interesting, very situational. I don't think I've ever seen anybody play this anywhere, either online or in person. But I guess if you're going to make a fluffy list that's joining with allies, then hey, why not?
Yeah, I agree. Very, very situational. One of the ones that I don't think personally I'll ever see used, just because of the fact it needs allies, and allies aren't something, well, we see it at all played in our community over here at Far East Wargaming. But if you guys have played this or seen this played against, let us know how it happened and what was the end result. Was it good to play against? Was it fun? I just see it very limited in all ways there.
Yeah, probably the last point that I would make is if you actually look at the allies matrix, right? The White Scars treat the Sons of Horus as distrusted allies. And what that means is that the Sons of Horus force, even any units in there with line, they actually can't hold objectives because of the way the allies rules and the allies matrix works. So you'll have to pay attention to that as well if you decide to use this Warlord trait, because perhaps those extra line units that you were going to be counting on out of the Sons of Horus allied force, they're not going to be able to cap your objectives for you. It's a bit of a strange writing, the way that this is done, and it's kind of strange that perhaps the Warlord trait didn't clarify or change that aspect of the interaction between the two forces. But yeah, it's just, I don't rank this Warlord trait very highly. Very situational at best.
So now that we've covered the Warlord traits, let's move on to the White Scars Rights of War. And there are only two. And I think they're actually very interesting ones. The first one is called the Chorian Brotherhood, and this really takes advantage or helps emphasize what we traditionally see of the White Scars. And how this works is Legion Skyhunter Squadrons and Legion Outrider Squadrons may be selected as Troops Choice, and if they're selected as Troops Choice, they gain the Line subtype. Now, these two units, the Skyhunter Squadrons and the Outrider Squadrons, can also be selected as Elite Choices, but if they are selected as Elite Choices, they don't gain the Line. And then all infantry models in the detachment with this Right of War gain the Outflank Special Rule. These are all three very positive effects. One could argue that being both troops and elites, why would you take up your valuable elite slots with what is basically could be taken up as a troop slot, which then scores line? Yeah, I like it. Limitations wise, any unit made up of entirely of infantry models with this Right of War that does not begin embarked on a transport subtype or a unit subtype that is fast or flyer has to begin in reserves. And that's only if the missions allow reserves. And I think most missions do allow reserves there.
This could actually be huge, right? So gone are your recon squads, unless you're forking out for some sort of transport, right? Recon squads, incredibly powerful. The further limitation is about heavy support. You can't take any heavy support or fortifications unless those are models with the flyer subtype. So gone are your infantry heavy support squads, your Leviathan Dreadnought, your tanks in the heavy support slot. So for firepower, you're actually giving up a lot, right? No recon Marines with Nemesis bolters, no las cannon squads, no Leviathans, no tanks. You're giving away a lot of that. So what you do need to plan for is where are you going to get your anti-vehicle punch, or where are you going to get more of your anti-infantry punch. So in my mind, it's going to come out of the bikes themselves, obviously, right? You're going to be taking probably, Volkite, Jetbikes, multi-melta Jetbikes. You're going to be taking things in the elite slot for firepower, like your Contemptors, perhaps even your Rapiers. You're going to be taking things in the fast slot for your anti-tank, like Sabers. You can take Fire Raptors, right? So the way that this Right of War is written, you could, if you wanted to, load up on Fire Raptors in your heavy support slot. And they're not bad. They still have a ton of firepower. They're not expensive in terms of points. I think a Fire Raptor is still cheaper than a 10-man las cannon squad. But you do have to plan your list a lot around this, obviously. But I can also see some other uses, right? Taking a couple bare bones Jetbike squads just as line to go cap an objective, or even to sit back on an objective while other units are going and doing the actual work. It's very fast. It's very flavorful. It allows you to field something like what? Elites, troops, plus fast attack slots. If you wanted to, you could be taking something like 13 squads of bikes and jet bikes through those three, plus your command squads on bikes if you wanted to do this, if you really wanted to go all out pure white scars. But you do have to plan on how you're going to handle your heavy weapon options, your anti-tank options, etc. I like it. It's fluffy. I've seen this one played all the time. It's definitely the quintessential White Scars Rite of War and the quintessential White Scars Force. I like this one a lot. But again, you're going to have to plan for the downside on the heavy support and this kind of thing.
Yeah, they're all valid points. You can take infantry troops, so you can take recons and such, but you just don't get the benefit of their scout and their infiltrate rules there. They have to come on with every other troop in a outflank. I've seen this played a couple ways, to be honest. I think that one way you can play mission dependent is bringing on line infantry to hold your own zone through outflank near your deployment area, as opposed to using them as a offensive outflank, literally coming in later in the game to hold your defensive or the middle zone for a defensive purpose, whilst your Legion Outriders and your Sky Hunters are the ones charging forward and causing havoc in enemy lines. It does require a bit of finesse for heavy support options, anti-heavy options there. But also you've got to bear in mind that Legion Sky Hunter squadrons can take plasma cannons and multi-melters and Volkite culverins. So there is quite a lot of firepower available from the scoring potential troop unit there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And coming back to just the point on recons, right? Like theoretically, you could still take a recon squad if you buy them a Rhino. But now that nice, cheap little 5-man Nemesis Bolter unit does get a little bit more expensive. If you're planning on bringing them on through reserves, then you've given up basically 2 rounds of shooting, right? Because you're not coming on turn 1. Even if you come on turn 2, you're still going to be, you've got heavy weapons, so you're going to be snap shooting. It doesn't mean that you don't have infantry options for sure. But again, you're just going to have to plan on how you want to use them. If you want them coming on from your zone, like you just described, or if you're going to pay the transport tax, as I would call it, so that they can actually be on the board to start.
The one thing I will say that is a significant downside for this Rite of War, and the White Scars in general actually, is less to do with it being White Scar specific, and more to do with the way Horus Heresy 2.0 is treating cavalry in itself, more specifically jet bikes and bikes. They've lost their invulnerability that they had, or their strong invulnerability that they had in the first edition, where they now no longer have a 2+ save as standard, and or they don't have T5. So crack missiles are destroying these expensive units if the sergeant isn't tanking a lot of shots. And for us at Far East Wargaming, we've adapted the house rule of only allowing upgraded artificer armor to tank 4 shots. So a 10-man missile launcher squad is still destroying this unit.
Yes, jet bikes and Outriders are definitely not as tanky as they used to be in 1.0, with the ability to take a jinx save, with the T5, with the 2-up save on jet bikes. But in some ways, I actually understand why they made the change, because people were just making jet bikes an auto-include and throwing them into all kinds of situations that they probably had no business being in. I do think that the happy medium would be some sort of rule, like giving them back T5 or giving them back something like Battle Hardened 1 to make them a bit more survivable. But yes, I mean, you do have to be a bit careful, and I do love seeing all bike and jet bike heavy White Scars army, or any army for that matter. But Yes, just be careful how you plan your list. Don't completely go the bike route unless you're planning on, a lot of your bikes dying, because they are a bit more squishy now than they used to be.
I think your take on battle hardened on Jetbikes or any of the cavalry there would actually be a very simple and clean way of doing it, because it would stop that instant death happening, but it would still make them easy to wound by normal weapons if that's what the goal GW had there. But moving on, we are going to look at the second one, and this is the infantry focused version of the White Scars Rite of War, and that's the Magyar Mason Rite of War. And this one here allows the Ebbenkeshig cohorts to be taken as troop choices, but they don't gain line, and all units entirely composed of infantry models in this detachment are given the Karash rule and also a 5+ feel no pain, as well as all models with the White Scars rule and the Karash rule, so all infantry models here, gain the Fearless special rule during the turn they successfully make a charge.
Yes, there's a lot of discussion online on just how powerful this Rite of War is. I personally am in the camp that I think it's very strong. If we look at the effects, right, Ebbenkeshig as troops, meh, because again, they need a dedicated transport. They can't take a Spartan in the heavy support squad because of the limit, or excuse me, in the heavy support slot because of the limitations. I don't view that as too much of a benefit, but if you like Ebbenkeshig models and you want to take them, go ahead. Where I think this becomes really strong is the Feel No Pain 5. You don't need apothecaries anymore. All of your infantry are getting this 5-up Feel No Pain, and a model that has Heart of the Legion, or a unit that has that rule, which is your tacticals, your despoilers, they're getting 4-up Feel No Pains on objectives, and that is huge. And saving on the apothecaries is nice point savings as well. The Fearless, when you charge, means you're less likely to break, so you can hold up a lot of enemy units. You can hold up their Death Stars, throw sacrificial units, etc. Where this gets nasty, right, is the Karash rule means you no longer give up victory points when you die, right? So a mission that gives up victory points for units, like I don't remember exactly which mission it is, but you nominate, infantry type or vehicle type, etc. If your opponent for some reason saw you using this, he could no longer choose infantry, so he gains no victory points from it. You cannot take Karash on unique models. That's been clarified in the FAQ. But your generic HQs now have Karash. So if your Warlord is killed, he doesn't give any victory points. If it's a Praetor or a Delegatus, he's not giving up those points. So you can play a lot more aggressive. You can trade a lot more of your units that you don't really have to worry about giving up the victory points. Obviously, you still want to pay attention to your own scoring units like line and etc., stuff like this. This can be really nasty in the right hands and with the right army list construction behind it. Now, where the limitations do hurt you a bit is you can't put units into reserve. You cannot do deep strike, subterranean assaults, or flanking assaults. So that's going to limit some of your unit choices there. You cannot take heavy support that does not compose entirely of infantry models. So no Leviathans, no tanks in the heavy support slot, no Scorpius. So those are some big limitations, but hey, your heavy support squad infantry is on the table. So you should be taking probably 3 squads of those, las cannons, Volkites, etc. I like this one a lot. And one of the reasons why I also like this Rite of War is it opens up a new dimension, a new play style of 30K, which is denial. And what I mean by that is your army is not giving up points, most of it at least, right? So you can deny the enemy their ability to gain extra points. Another thing that springs to mind is something like the Headhunter Leviathan or the Raven Guard, where they get points for killing independent characters or HQs. Well, if your HQ no longer gives up any points due to the Karash rule, then theoretically you don't give up any points to those Rites of War, so you kind of gimp them a little bit. So this is all about resource management, denial play style. I think it's pretty cool. And probably the last reason why I think it's a good Rite of War for the White Scars is it encourages you to run infantry heavy if you want, which is definitely a very different type of army than what you would normally see out of this Legion.
Yes, this Rite of War here actually synergizes very well with their loyalist only Warlord trait, the heroes never die. You're not afraid of choosing a very cheap Delegatus as or a cheap Centurion to play as your Warlord because he can go die, and if he's correctly placed when he does, the rest of your army could potentially be fearless. it's it's quite strong there. Also, for newer players who are just starting the Horus Heresy and picking up an Age of Darkness box, this is a Rite of War that can be run very easily with just the standard box set, as opposed to having to dish out, even though we have plastic Jetbikes for 30k now, for a more traditional White Scars themed army going bike heavy there.
Yeah, you actually stole the words right out of my mouth, because when we were looking at the Warlord traits, this is exactly the interaction, the synergy that I was hinting at, which is that Warlord trait plus this Rite of War can make a pretty sticky, durable kind of army. And you're absolutely right about the starter box as well. Just remember that the Spartan would have to be a dedicated transport for probably the Cataphracti Termes, because you can't take it as a heavy support choice due to the limitations.
Well, that's all for the two Rites of War. Let's delve into the armory specific to the White Scars. And since they are White Scars, of course they have to have their own type of jetbike, don't they?
They do, and this is called the Shamshir Jetbike. This is the same jetbike type that is on the Goldenkeshig. You can give it to your characters, your independent characters that are White Scars, but not the unique models. So no shenanigans with the named characters. They basically can exchange a normal Scimitar Jetbike for a Shamshir. The Shamshir grants some rules. They get +1 move, so they're 15. They get shrouded when they run, which is nice, which is kind of a Pseudo Jink from 1.0. The Shamshir Jetbike also comes with firing protocols 2, cavalry anti-grav subtype, Hammer of Wrath 1, and it improves your armor save to a 2-up if it was worse, but the only case that would be applicable is with the Goldenkeshig, right? It comes with a Scatterbolt launcher as well, which I'll talk about just because it's here. The Scatterbolt launcher is a template. It's strength 5, AP 4, so equivalent almost to a heavy flamer, assault 1 shred, and it pins. So it is a useful weapon if you're planning on playing very aggressive to begin with, because quite frankly, your White Scars, you're going to want to be up in people's face, and you're probably sticking your character with some Goldenkeshig. So yeah, it has use from that perspective. But if the pinning fails, and if for some reason the charge fails, although I don't know why it would, you are a little bit weak because you have such a short range weapon. But considering that your character Jetbike can only take a heavy bolter to begin with, it's not a bad upgrade. And considering that you're probably sticking in with Goldenkeshig because of their nasty charge bonuses that we'll talk about in just a moment, yeah, it's not bad. It's nice for the White Scars, and it doesn't cost any extra points. So yeah, some good little extra rules there.
Yeah, it forces you to really take a aggressive focus to your jetbikes, and as we talked about previously, they're not as durable anymore, taking fire coming in. But the shrouded 5+ on a run is helpful, but if they run, they can't charge. So again, or shoot their templates. It's kind of a two-sided thing, and an 8-inch template when most normal scimitar jetbikes come with a heavy bolter, multi-melter, Volkite, or plasma cannon there. Seems a bit of a large trade-off in my opinion, but let us know, guys, if your opinion differs there. They also have access to a new power weapon, the Power Glaive. I say new, it's just a upgraded power weapon there with +1 strength, AP 3, melee, and breaching 5. So slightly better than the power sword with its +1 strength and breaching 5 there, but not a must take in my opinion as opposed to the previous one.
I agree with you. The Power Glaive in 1.0 was absolutely a must take because it was so powerful with its strength bonuses and its AP. This also does not have two-handed for some reason, even though a glaive is a big, large two-handed weapon in real life. So it does stack with your bolt pistol for a bonus attack. It does have breaching 5, which is better than rending 6 or breaching 6, so that is a little bit stronger. And it is only 5 points. So if you're planning on taking a power weapon on like a squad sergeant, this isn't a bad choice whatsoever, but it's definitely not what you would auto-include on a character like you did before. I like it. It's not bad. It's not great. It is fluffy. It does look cool when it's on models. but it did get a massive nerf, in my opinion, from 1.0, and it's really only useful for your squad sergeants. And maybe if you want to like spam these on, I don't know, vets or command squads for some reason. But usually on those kinds of units, you're spamming other things like lightning claws or power fists when they're available.
Yeah, considering it is a shafted weapon, it didn't get the reach special rule, which some of the spears have for the Emperor's Children and other such legions. The Blood Angels, I think, have the same one. Um, and breaching 5, you're waiting on that 5+ there to be able to kill a vis-a-vis sergeant who is using a power fist in artificer armor. It's risky, I'll say this. But flavorful for the last one for the White Scars is their Cyberhawk. And this has changed quite a bit from the first version.
It has. It's changed, so it's only available to Legion Astartes, White Scars, and independent characters. It is not available to the unique type, so no shenanigans with your named characters taking a Cyberhawk. It only costs 10 points. The way it works is at the start of any turn in which the controlling player is the active player, so the White Scars turn, the model with the Cyberhawk can select one enemy unit with at least one model within 24 inches, not the whole unit, just one model. When making shooting attacks against that unit, the model with the Cyberhawk and any models in the unit that is joined reroll all failed to hit rolls of 1. And when declaring a charge against the chosen enemy unit, the Cyberhawk and any unit that he has joined, that model can add +1 to their charge roll, which does stack with the Legion roll as well. So you're possibly getting up to a +2 from normal infantry guys, +3 from models that have high movement. Yeah, this is nice, right? I mean, rerolling the ones to hit on shooting, that's pretty good. The charge bonus, even better. The range, I think, has been increased, if I'm not mistaken. In 1.0, I think it might have been 12 or 18 inches. Don't quote me on that. I need to go back and look. But I think 24 is longer than it used to be before. Nice little piece of war gear. And at 10 points, it's not expensive. So you're probably going to be putting this on your characters that you know you're going to be charging. I could even see a use for this on some of your shooty squads to take advantage of that +1 to hit and the 24-inch range. Yeah, I like it. Fluffy, cool to see on models, and definitely usable.
Yeah, I could see this being taken on a Master of Signals in your heavy support squad for that added bit of defense, because the 24 inches does limit its use. But if there's units coming to charge them, this is more or less guaranteeing every single one of your shots will hit, because with the Master of Signals, you're hitting on 2s, and now you're re-rolling 1s.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't know, a heavy support squad of multi-meltas gets really, really juicy, assuming that that something is within 24 inches. Because yeah, I mean the chances of you missing with all 10 shots, they're twin linked, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. That's 10 guaranteed hits. But even on other types of weapons, it's going to be useful because, like, if you're going to intercept, and let's face it, who doesn't? Most things you're going to intercept against are going to be within that 24-inch bubble. So now all of a sudden you've got more reliable hits on that. So definitely a useful piece of war gear.
The White Scars also have a Legion-specific Consolaris, and this is the Storm Seer for 45 points, which is basically a Psyker for the White Scars.
Yes, he's a specific psyker. He just got that new model that we talked about in another Heresy Thursday. He gains some special rules that are different from a normal librarian. So he can either choose the Storm's Fury, which is their own special psychic discipline, divination, telepathy, or thaumaturgy. I always mess up that one. Sorry. He also gains Adamantium Wheel 4-up, which improves his psychic defense. He can replace his bolt pistol power weapon combi bolter with a force weapon, and he can select a psychic hood for +15 points, which also has an effect on his psychic abilities. The psychic disciplines are pretty interesting because his psychic weapon is called the Unseen Bolt. So this is a shooting attack with a 72-inch range, strength 4 only, AP 4, but it's heavy 1, large blast 5, barrage, shock, pulse, and force. So if I'm not mistaken, because it's force, it is subject to abilities that kind of change the strength of the attack through the force rules. It's anti-vehicle, right? With that shock pulse. You can actually, pull some shenanigans with this because shock pulse can shut down super heavies. It can theoretically shut down things like knights. It's not a bad little weapon, and it's got a massive range. That's guaranteed to shoot pretty much every single turn. And even though it's only strength 4, AP 4, it is a large blast 5, which is not that common. So you are going to possibly kill an infantry model or two if you drop this onto an infantry unit. Nice little weapon. The second part of their psychic discipline is the call to win, the psychic power. Instead of moving, the psyker with his psychic power grant fleet 2 to all friendly units with at least one model within 6 inches of the psyker. There you go. Even more mobility for the White Scars as if they didn't need it. If you pass a psychic check, that goes to fleet 4. Wow, that's huge, right? You got your Legion rule giving you +1 to your movement. You got this potentially giving multiple units fleet 2 or fleet 4. Wow, like that's fast. That's super fast. And I've seen a lot of people taking Storm Seers on jet bikes or regular bikes. Already makes them incredibly mobile, and then just this psychic ability makes them even more so. A great little upgrade. I think if you were planning on already taking a psyker and you didn't want, one of the psykers that's doing, pinning checks on the enemy and this kind of stuff, or granting a preferred enemy, those kinds of psychic abilities, this is a good choice. Again, because he makes you very, very fast.
One thing we have to talk about as well for the Unseen Bolt is that it is a barrage weapon at 72-inch range. So it's hitting vehicles on the side armor, and with force, that's strength 8. So it does have a chance for most vehicles there, and the shock pulse stacking. But also it can do this from indirect fire.
Yes, absolutely. Great little power. Scorpius, beware. Your psyker, your White Scar Storm Seer is all of a sudden sniping Scorpius or other lighter skinned vehicles from afar. So yeah, that's a nice little ability.
If I was a White Scar player, I wouldn't be crying too much about the enemy Scorpiuses. Definitely taking a Storm Seer to get rid of that bad boy, because they have been they've been on the channel. We've had some Scorpiuses on the channel, and they are hit and miss, but when they hit hard.
Yes, and I mean this is also a good choice if you put it in the context of the Rights of War, limiting your heavy support choices, right? So your ability to still gain some sort of long-range barrage anti-vehicle ability is good. And that's probably intentional by GW, right? They probably didn't want to nerf White Scars so bad through the Rights of War that they couldn't actually shoot back effectively. I like it. Storm Seer, I think, is a nice little upgrade, and I do see him in a lot of forces.
Especially with his new model, I think we'll see him more and more there. Well, that's everything for the war gear and the special parts that aren't the units themselves. And for the units, as with every Legion, we'll start with the Primarch first, and that is Jagatai Khan for 440 points. And he's known as the Warhawk.
Yes,
here.
And he 440, right?
Yeah, 440 points.
Yeah, he's good. He's good. He's considered a top tier Primarch. I mean, if he's on foot, he has a movement 9. If he's on his own bike, he's a movement 18, including his, you have to convert the model, obviously, because the Khan mounted doesn't have a model yet. Weapon skill 7, which is very high. Strength, toughness 6, wound 6, wound 7 if you put him on a bike. Initiative 8, which is absolutely nasty. He's striking before a lot of the Primarchs, if not the majority of them. 6 attacks, leadership 10, 2+, which is pretty normal. His war gear, he has the Wildfire Panoply, which is his armor. He has the White Tiger Dao, which is his weapon. He has Storm's Voice, which is a shooting attack. He has frag grenades. All the rules of a Primarch. He also has Hit and Run, Crusader, Pathfinder, Move Through Cover, Lightning from the Blue Skies, which is a special rule, and he is the sire of the White Scars. To upgrade him on a bike is only 25 points. I've seen some cool conversions where people just take the regular Khan model, take an extra jet bike and put it on the base as if he's standing next to the bike. I've seen a couple where people have cut the legs and managed to put him on the bike. That's really, really nice. For 25 points, why wouldn't you? It just makes him so much more mobile and gives him that extra wound, which could be critical. Now, for his Warlord trait, it's Sire of the White Scars, and this is one of those Primarch Warlord traits that's a force multiplier. Because all infantry and cavalry models with the Legion of Astartes White Scars rule that are in the same army with the Khan, including the Khan himself, they gain Furious Charge 1 on any turn in which they have moved. That's big. That's more attacks on the charge, right? And you can make an additional reaction in the opposing player's movement phase, which is pretty standard. So I like the fact that he buffs your white scars, and if you're taking him on a bike, and you're probably taking bike-heavy armies. He makes those bike-heavy armies just hit harder, which is pretty nasty. Your Goldenkeshigs with their special weapon on the charge can be very powerful. Very nice force multiplier. He does have a lot of these rules through his war gear and whatnot. I'll let you take a step through those.
Yeah, his panoply is a very nice armor. It's standard 2+, 4+ invul, but it's a 3+ invul during the movement phase and the assault phase. So a 3+ invul in assault, which is on the strong side for the different Primarchs there, the close combat related ones. It's a very strong save. He also has the rule Lightning from the Blue Skies, and really what this means is if he's part of the reserves, he doesn't have to roll to come in. He's able to come in on any turn. The unit he's with is able to come in on any turn they like. If the Jagatan Khan is part of a flanking assault, then this rule applies to all other units part of that flanking assault. So you'd generally be putting him with that to take advantage of this rule, but it means any turn you like, you can come in via flanking assault. It doesn't apply to deep strike or subterranean assaults or drub pod assaults. And we have seen some limitations of flanking assaults in this latest rules edition, with the way you have to elect the start where you are. You can be walled out. And since he's not coming in on a grav, or is he coming? He is coming in on the grav, so he can actually come over them. But the rest of the flanking assault could get stuck. It's a nice little rule to have. It gives him versatility. It's akin a bit to some of the other legions who have the ability to select or write down early which turn they come in from flanking assault. Again, more force multiplying from the Khan here, along with his Sire of the White Scars rules this. He's also got his... Sorry? Yeah.
I was just going to add one more point. I mean, again, if you look at the way his armor rule is written, he gets that 3-up invuln during the movement phase. And since he's coming in as a flanking assault, if somebody intercepts, he's on a 3-up invuln. So now all of a sudden he's able to tank a bunch of las cannon shots on behalf of his squad, for example, at a better chance, right, with that 3-up invuln. So there is that interaction between the two rules there as well.
It's a very good point. Interceptor is very prevalent nowadays, especially with las cannons and everybody taking augury scanners there. You do tend to see a lot being deleted off the board when they come in from flanking assault, reserves, or deep strike. It gives additional survivability. But I think any Primarchs themselves, when they come in, are quite a daunting thing, and their priority number one just gives them a bit of a chance to survive. Looking at his weapons, we talked about it just now, the Storm's Voice, and this is his pistol. Standard range 12 inches, strength 6, AP 4, 2 shots, rending 5, deflagrate, concussive 1, and master crafted. So a nice little piece of gear, but not game breaking, I'd say.
No, it's not. I mean, theoretically, if you rolled incredibly hot, you could get 4 rending 5-up hits, right? Because you could shoot twice with the pistol, and because it's mastercrafted and it's ballistic skill, you're probably going to hit with both of them. You roll to wound with those. If you get lucky, you get double rends, and then you deflagrate on top of those, potentially with rends. Yeah, nice little pistol. And when you combine it with his bike rules that we'll talk about in a moment, he gets a lot of shots off, so it makes him a little bit more on the shooty side compared to some of the other Primarchs, but his weapon is definitely not as powerful as some of the others.
The same can be said for his close combat weapon, the White Tiger Dao. It's +1 strength, pushing him to strength 7. AP 2, standard for most Primarchs. Duelist Edge 1, so +1 initiative for his already high initiative in a challenge there. Furious Charge 2, Murder Strike 5+, and Master Crafted. So not one of the strongest ones, but still pretty powerful for a Primarch's weapon.
It is, but I mean, that combination of Furious Charge and his already high 6 attacks, he does get a lot of attacks on the charge at strength 7, AP 2, Duelist Edge for use in challenges, and the Master Crafted and the Murderous Strike. I mean, with as many attacks as he can get, there's a good chance he's going to trigger 1 to 3 murderous strikes every time he swings on the charge. That could be pretty brutal in just cutting through multi-wound models, or doing a lot of damage to something like a Contemptor, right? Because of the murderous strike, the way it works with Contemptors now. Pretty powerful. I got to admit, it's pretty powerful. And again, if he's in a challenge with that Duelist Edge, he's already initiative 8, and that's just getting even better. So he's going to be striking before pretty much any opponent, with the exception of 1 or 2 of the Primarchs. And then finally, we have his special bike, which is called the Sojutsu Pattern Void Bike. So this is what you pay 25 points to upgrade, and you probably should do it. If you take this bike, he gets 2 Mastercrafted Heavy Bolters. He gets Hammer of Wrath 2 and Firing Protocols 3. So as I mentioned before, he can now shoot both of the Heavy Bolters as well as his pistol if he needed to. Anti-Grav subtype. His fallback for hit and run is 3d6 instead of 2d6. When he's upgraded to this, he can join units with the cavalry unit type despite the usual restrictions, and any rules that target the cavalry unit type are considered to affect Jagatai Khan as if he had that unit type. So what this basically does is it opens up his ability to join some different units, because any unit with the cavalry subtype can now all of a sudden be joined by the Khan. Normally, you would only be able to interact with certain units if your character is on a jet bike. So this just opens that up a little bit. I mean, again, I think the upgrade is a must take unless you don't feel like converting your model and your friends play strict WYSIWYG, because it just makes him so much more mobile. It gives him all these extra little nifty abilities, a little bit extra shooting firepower, an extra wound. There's no reason not to take this upgrade, in my opinion.
Yeah, the fact that he doesn't have a model on bike was kind of something I think that Forgeworld and GW missed there, because who wouldn't take the Khan on a bike, or at least want the option of the model to do so. But with the idea or the rumor that they might be releasing some of the Primarchs, maybe we'll see him get a bike soon.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we've got new models coming out, like, Horus Ascended. I would be shocked if there wasn't a Khan on a bike model coming. The question is just, when are we going to get it?
So that's the Primarch, and we'll move on to the Elites, which there are 2 of in the Liber Astartes. And we've spoken about them earlier in the podcast, but the first one is the Goldenkeshig Squadron for 140 points. So this is the special Shamshir Jetbike unit, and it comes for 140 points with 3 models, all in Artificer armor, with that movement of 15 we talked about previously. But apart from that, it's a pretty standard profile for a Scimitar Jetbike here. You can upgrade the unit to add 3 more Goldenkeshig for 40 points. They can upgrade their weapons for a power weapon or a charnel weapon for 10 points each. And they can have Vexillas. The champion may also have a Thunder Hammer. But I think it's their special weapon, the Kontos Power Lance, that really shines for these guys.
It is, but what's very interesting to me is the weapon exchanges are for the chainsword. So you actually don't have to give up the lance. So if you want them to have some staying power, because the way the power lance works, it's on the charge, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. You can upgrade their chainsword to power axes, power swords. You can give the champion a thunder hammer. These are useful upgrades, right? Because the way the lance works, it's counted as a power weapon, the Kontos Power Lance. It's strength 10, AP 1. That's ridiculous. There's very few weapons in the game that have that profile. It is a melee weapon. It is ungainly. It has lance, which means it lowers the armor value of the target that it hits. Brutal 3, sudden strike 4, two-handed. So basically, when you charge with these guys, whatever you charge just dies. Because the way that the ungainly rule works is you can only attack with this weapon on the turn that you make a successful charge. So you charge in with the lances. You don't gain any bonus for charging or from any other special rules that grant you additional attacks. But a squadron of 6 of these guys is still going to deliver 7 strength 10 AP 1 attacks on the charge with brutal 3 and weapon skill 5. And if it happens to be a vehicle, there's a very good chance it's going to blow up the vehicle because of the lance rule. Whatever you point these at just dies. Like, I see these as a very popular choice in White Scar's army. I see sometimes people even take multiples of this unit. And again, the fact that you can upgrade their chainsword into other weapons means if for some reason you don't kill whatever you hit, you've got ability to still swing with something else if necessary, right? Because you can't use the lance anymore after the charge. And very nice unit. Absolutely what you want to stick your HQ character with. That's kitted out to be aggressive, to kit it out for assault. I like this unit a lot, and I love the models. I think the models look very cool. Still in resin from Forgeworld, but they definitely look very different to a standard jet bike, and they have some nifty little decorations and things like that on them. Really, really powerful unit, and nasty on the charge.
Yeah, and the fact that they have the hit and run rule means also that they don't actually have to stay if they don't want to after the combat is concluded. But I don't think there'd be much left of many of the units after taking 7 strength 10 AP 1 hits and that brutal 2. It is destroying what it hits on impact, even most contemptors there.
Brutal 3.
Oh, brutal 3, yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, it's worse than a Thunderhammer.
So yeah, it's instant deathing a lot of things. Well, actually, nearly everything for that. But it doesn't have the murder strike, which I don't think it really needs.
No, it doesn't need it. I mean, the brutal 3 and the strength 10. I mean, even your battle hardened 1 units that get hit by this thing, with the brutal 3, there's very low chance they survive the hit. The weapon skill 5, which we know is like the sweet spot for weapon skills in Heresy 2, means you're hitting most targets on 3s. If you had to, if you stuck a chaplain on a jet bike with these guys, they're all of a sudden re-rolling any failed to hits. So this is definitely a very nice unit to just go out and just smash something.
But not a cheap unit. I think it's 260 points if you go for the 6-man squad, not including any upgrades you might want to add there. So you're looking at a 300 point plus unit for a 6-man. That is less squishy because of the 2+ saves, but still vulnerable to that doubling out for instant death that we talked about in the past.
True, but just don't forget the Shamshir jet bike grants that Shrouded 5 if you run.
Yeah.
So you do get a little bit of durability there, but yeah, you're right. They do have a bit of the downside of a standard jet bike, but a bit more durability because of the save and the shroud.
The next one is another Keshig, but it's the Ebbenkeshig cohort as the second elite option there, and they are 200 points for 5 models. These are all in Tartarus Terminator armor, wielding power glaives. They are the ones with the Karash rule as standard, a 5+ feel no pain and stubborn relentless. You can add 5 extra Karash for 40 points each. Upgrade wise, they can take combi bolters and power weapons instead of the power glaives. Power fists as well. The Magna and Minor combis. Vexillas, and the important thing we keep forgetting on our Terminators is grenade harnesses, which are actually very important for Terminators here. But especially when you're using weapons which aren't unwieldy, as the Power Glaive is.
Yeah, these are nice models. It's a shame that they're not more usable. And the reason why they're not more usable is they don't have a dedicated transport option. And they're not weapon skill 5 either, right? Which doesn't make them as good as a lot of the other Legion-specific termies. You do need to take the grenade harness. You're probably, if you're going to take these, you're going to have to then buy a Spartan or a Land Raider in the heavy support slot. And we talked about in the Rights of War that some of them won't actually allow you to do that. It's a shame. I just don't think that these models, or I should say this unit, is very usable without extra stuff added onto it. And that, again, is a shame because the models look so great. The models make a good basis of conversion for a lot of good characters and things like this. I like the unit from that perspective, but from the way the rules are written and the options available to them, I just don't think they're that good.
Then, for fast attack, there is another cavalry unit that's available to the White Scars, and that's the Kagan Assault Speeder Squadron here for 105 points for 1 and 105 points for up to an additional 2. And these are stronger javelins, basically.
That part's debatable, and let me tell you why. It comes with a different loadout on its weapons, right? Um, you get access to hunter killers just like a javelin. You can take 2 of them at 5 points each. You can add up to 2 to the squadron to make it a squadron of 3. The extras are 105 each. Um, you have most of the same rules as a regular javelin, but your weapons are much different. Instead of a heavy bolter or a multi-melta, you get access to a carrier's assault cannon, which isn't bad. Carries and the chance to rend. I mean, it's better than a heavy bolter. It's not as good against vehicle or heavy armor or middle armor as a multi-melta would be. And then the side weapons are Reaper autocannons, which again are not going to be as powerful for anti-tank duties as even your Cyclone missile launchers firing crack or your las cannons. Um, in my mind, it's more of an anti-infantry type javelin, and most legions just through the generic units have access to plenty of things that are anti-infantry. Your Jetbikes are packing heavy bolters and Volkite culverins or plasma cannons. You have so many other ways to deal with infantry in the White Scars army. Um, it's a shame that they didn't at least allow this to have the option of a multi-melta, or besides the hunter killer missiles and praying for things like Wrens, you don't have a way to deal with most armor unless it's something like a Rhino or a Saber. I like the model. I have a couple in the White Scars force that I'm trying to accumulate and paint. Um, but I don't know if it's better than actually a regular javelin. I mean, I think that's actually debatable.
It is 15 points more than a regular javelin, but it does get an additional point of toughness, so 7 instead of 6 there. But you're right, it is a different purpose, I think. Definitely easier to kill infantry with this, and a bit more survivability, but that toughness 7 doesn't really make much of a difference against most weapons, mainly bolters there, because it doesn't push it past the point where bolters can do any damage to it.
Yes. Again, I like the model. I would still probably stick 1 or 2 in our White Scars force because I usually play fluffy and I usually like to include Legion units in a lot of my lists. But if I'm looking for anti-tank, and we can't forget that with the limitations on heavy support, the way they affect the White Scars lists, um, I need more anti-tank options, and this one just isn't it.
All very valid points. Now, that concludes all of the units that are in the Liber Statis, but the White Scars have 2 extra units that are in the Legacies and also the Exemplary Battles. And the one in the Legacies is one I actually like because it's quite fluffy. And that's the Falcon's Claws for 95 points. And this is a 5-man squad in scout armor, but they come with lightning claws, move through cover, outflank, precision strike 5 plus, shroud bombs, frag grenades, and crack bombs, and can be upgraded to an additional 5 claws for 16 points a model. The sergeant himself can be upgraded with a thunderhammer for 20, a power fist for 15, hand flamer for 5, a plasma pistol for 10, a Volkite Serpenta for 5. But, to make it even more fluffy, they can take a Cyberhawk for 10 points as well, whose use is a bit debatable for this unit here. I like it. I think it's a very fluffy unit that you do have to do some quite significant conversions for.
Yes, and speaking of conversions, I've seen some nice ones using scout bodies, whether it's the old ones or the new ones, the Lightning Claw pairs and Mark IV or Mark VI helmets. I like this unit. I have a slightly different take on it in terms of the Cyberhawk. This unit to me is a massive distraction Carnifex. Any unit with massive amounts of Lightning Claws in pairs is something you can't ignore, because if it gets a charge off, it's just going to blender whatever it hits. So if you take, and taking the extra models isn't that expensive. I mean, each one is coming with the claws. If you take a squad of 10 of these guys, your opponent must deal with it. And because they have the ability to outflank, the ability to move through cover, they're pretty mobile. They can do some damage if they get into combat. And yes, you're right. The Cyberhawk for the +1 to hit from shooting is a little bit debatable, but you get the +1 to the charge bonus. And then don't forget, because of their scouts and then the +1 to their movement, you get a charge bonus from that. Again, your opponent can't ignore these guys. And even if you want to take just a bare bones 5-man squad, it's not expensive. And your opponent has to worry about it, right? Lightning claws and pairs are just nasty, and that's the reason why you see people taking them on command squads. You see people taking them as much as possible because the number of attacks that a squad can generate is just big. So I like this because used properly, it takes heat off of your bikes. It takes heat off of your other aggressive units. You use it as a distraction. You use it to cause havoc. Your opponent can't ignore it, and if he's shooting at it, he's not shooting at something else. And because you're in cover as well, you get a bonus to cover saves most of the time. And because of the shroud bombs, you can perhaps negate some of the shooting. I do like this unit, and it's cheap, so I can see a use for this in most lists.
We've also got a elite choice here, which is the White Scars Dark Sons of Death. And this is another 5-man squad for 155 points here. They come with the standard Dark Sun is weapon skill 4, but the champion is weapon skill 5. And their war gear is a bolt pistol and chainsword, so very much like an assault squad here. Crack grenades, frag grenades, rad grenades, power armor, and Legion Warhawk jump pack. And for their special rules, they have the Stubborn rule, the Shadow of Death rule, the Stormseer's Conclave, and the Invocation of the Raising Tempest. And this 5-man squad can be upgraded to a 15-man squad for 20 points each there, with various standard upgrades you'd get for a assault or very similar unit there. And of course artificer armor on sergeants. But it's their special rules that are quite unique. So the first one being the Shadow of Death. A unit that includes any model with a special rule may only be joined by Legion Centurion with the Legion Centurion Consularis Stormseer upgrade or the Moratat upgrade. So they can't be joined by Tech Marines, they can't be joined by Apothecaries, and nor can they gain any special rule that is applied from these two here. Now, the Stormseer's Conclave is a unique one. It allows this unit to be the retinue of the Stormseer instead of being an elite choice. And this is quite special because normally to have a retinue, you have to be a master of the Legion, and the Stormseer is not. So you're freeing up a slot there to be able to put these guys with your Legion-specific console here. You will have to upgrade the Stormseer to have a Warhawk jump pack to make this effective, but it's still nice to see. And the Invocation of the Raising Tempest is a unit with at least one model, so it does apply to the Stormseer when he is included. Gains the Fleet 2 Rage 2 special rule for the duration of the current assault phase when attempting to charge an enemy unit that they outnumber at the point of declaring their charge here. So again, the Rage 2, the Fleet 2 adding some extra distance there, it's a powerful unit. I just don't know if it's worth the considerable points increase from a more standard one.
Well, it's their special destroyer unit, right? And I think, the rad grenades, we have to remember the rad grenades lowering toughness in the first round of combat down to 3 for most infantry models. The Rage 2, that's essentially bumping up the, if I'm not mistaken, Rage is doing the +2 to their strength, right? They're striking, at strength 6 on the charge against T3, as long as they outnumber the opponent. And then your Stormseer is kitted for close combat, probably. So this is another unit that can go in and do some damage on the charge. Good in hand-to-hand. I like it. It's fluffy. It's unique to the White Scars. Not an auto-occlude, in my opinion, unless you want to run a Stormseer that way. It's nice, but I would say as far as like some of the other exemplary battles units, it's not an auto-include. It's not a must-take in any way in my mind, but it is useful, I think, in some lists.
Rage is increasing the number of attacks by 2. It doesn't increase the strength of the attacks by 2 there, but the fleet increases the movement range by 2, so it's just a bit of a bonus for extra. But yes, like you said, it is a destroyer unit there for the White Scars. again, for me, the points are a bit heavy for this unit.
I agree, and I always, for some reason, you'll have to excuse me, I always get Furious Charge and Rage mixed up in my head, so thank you for correcting that. I guess the last thing I would say on why I also view it as not an auto-include is you have so many ways to kill infantry, and so many heavy hitters in the Goldenkeshig or command squads. You've got just all these different ways to deal with infantry. I don't necessarily see this unless you're trying to save elite slots, unless you're trying to give your Storm Seer a retinue. But in most cases, I see Storm Seers on Jetbikes, like we talked about before. Not a bad unit, not an auto-include in my opinion.
So that's all of the Legion-specific units. Now moving on to the special characters, and we're back in the Liber Astartes book. And we're looking at the HQ choice, the Master of the Keshig, the Chosen of the Kagan, Kinza, for 220 points.
Yeah, he's pretty good. He's movement 8, which includes his bonus, so he's getting that +1 to his charge. He's weapon skill 6, which is very good. Your standard 4s across most of the other profiles. Initiative 6, which is really good. Attacks 5, also very good. Leadership 10, 2+ save. He comes in Tartarus armor. He has an Iron Halo, which is rare, right? Because normally you don't get to keep your Iron Halo if you're a Praetor in Tartarus Terminator armor. So he has the 4-up invuln. He does come with a grenade harness. And he's got his special weapons, the Tail of the Dragon. And as far as his special rules, he has a lot of them. He does have Master of the Legion if you take him for that. Counterattack 2, Furious Charge 1, Relentless, Stubborn. Although the Relentless he doesn't have a shooting attack, so that part of Relentless doesn't work. He's Master of the Keshig, which is another one of his special rules, and then he has his own Warlord. His Warlord trait is called Chosen of the Kagan. If he's chosen as the Kagan, if he's chosen as the Warlord and he has this trait, once per battle, he can bring a single friendly eligible unit or group of friendly units assigned to a deep strike assault or flanking assault into reserves automatically. So that could be huge, right? Being able to bring in things automatically from reserves is very potent. But again, you always have the risks of interception and things like this. In addition, any army who has this Warlord trait can make an additional reaction in the assault phase. Again, it's debatable whether assault is the best. Shooting is always the best, as we know. It's not a bad Warlord trait at all, but you do have to build your army around it. And remember that the Warlord traits for the White Scars do have some limitations on things like deep strike, flanking assault. So you can't actually put him in every single list. As far as his special rules, Master of the Keshig, anybody in a Tartarus command squad could get a Power Glaive for 5 points if you wanted to do that for some reason. Not a bad choice, a fluffy choice, but most of the time when you're taking Terminator armored command squads, you're giving them things like Thunder Hammers. So giving that up for a glaive is not an upgrade in my opinion. But his own weapons are really good, which is the Tails of the Dragon. He has 2 weapons. The bonus for having the 2 weapons is already in his profile with the attacks 5. They're counted as power weapons, and they have a different profile. So at the start of each assault phase, you basically have to choose which profile you use. And one is called Split the Mountain, which makes his attacks +3 strength, AP2, melee unwieldy, but master crafted. So all of a sudden he's striking at strength 7. And then Part the Horse's Mane, +1 strength, AP2, but he gets precision strikes 3+ and master crafted. That's probably the one that you're going to be using a lot more often because you can choose to allocate against things like, sergeants, vexillas, any of your special snowflakes in the target unit. You get the precision strikes 3-up, and then because of the master crafted and your weapon skill 6, chances are you're going to hit with a lot of your attacks. So he has some punch, on the charge. He has some punch as a character. But again, his Warlord trait is going to put some limits on what kinds of lists you stick him in to take advantage of it. Not a bad character, a beautiful model, a great choice for very themed lists and very White Scars lists in terms of, the special models and things that you're using. But I don't know if he's better than perhaps some of the other choices that could be available to you, even a properly tooled up Praetor. Especially if you're not going to run a rite of war that needs the deep strike or the flanking assault guaranteed to come in. You just have to plan your list a little bit more, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to make.
Yep, you have to also bear in mind that the Split the Mountain is +3 strength, but it's +4 on the charge, so it is instant deathing a lot of things. But for that, you are gaining the unwieldy. So there is a very valid question is of whether you go for that against a other opponent who is unwieldy and instant deathing you in return, or if you risk the master crafted 3+ precision strikes there. It is definitely a toss up and very situational on which one you use. I think that, like you said, the horse's mane where it's not unwieldy and +1 strength AP2 is the one you'll see used most often there.
Yes, and again, to me, if I compare it to the standard choice of most lists, which is a Praetor in Terminator armor or even a Delegatus in Terminator armor, the Praetor and the Delegatus, most cases, they're taking a Thunderhammer to get access to the Brutal 2, and they're also striking with a Strength 8 unwieldy. So that's a wash, right? He does potentially have more attacks. He does have a few different rules to him, and again, he does have a Warlord trait that's unique to lists. I don't know. I just don't view him as who I would take the majority of the time in place of a regular tooled up character. That's just my opinion. But I have seen him used, and I have seen him used in some really nice armies, including when I was at Gibraltar at No Retreat. I like it, but not the beat stick that a Sigma Sind or a Sevatar or a lot of the other characters would be. They're just at a different tier than Chainsaw. But he's not bad by any stretch of the imagination.
Now, finally, the last character for the White Scars is in their legacies, and he's quite a unique one. And it's Solomon Khan for 180 points here. And he comes with movement 8, weapon skill 6, ballistic skill 5, strength 5 as standard, toughness 4, 3 wounds, initiative 5, 4 attacks, leadership 10, and a 2+ save from his Artificer armor. He also has an Iron Halo, a Combi Melter, bolt pistol, and his special weapon, the Tsenhan. I think I pronounced that correctly, or I butchered it, one or the other there. He is a loyalist only. Special rule is Ally of the Silent Order, which makes him quite fun to play. And he can be riding a Scimitar Jetbike for 30 points. So what's special about him is this special rule, Ally of the Silent Order here. And this says a detachment that includes Solomon Khan may include a single Knight Centuria as non-compulsory HQ choice without taking up a Force Org slot. A Raptora Cadra can be taken as a retinue for this Knight Centura. Sister of the Silence included in the army with Solomon Khan are treated as sworn brothers. So this is a way to get some anti-psyker into your army without having to take an allied detachment of Sisters of Silence. I think that's pretty cool.
It is cool, and this is a character from the books, right? And he was known for his association with the Sisters of Silence, so it's fluffy from that perspective as well. I do agree with you. It's a nice little way to get some anti-psyker support or anti-demon support into your list without taking allies. You just have to be careful because remember, Sisters debuffs can actually work against you in terms of debuffing leadership or messing with your own psychers. So if you are going to do this, you have to be a bit careful about that, careful about the placement, etc. He's not a bad choice. He's not a beat stick. He's not, again, better than a tooled up Praetor in my opinion. But he does have his own little unique ability as you described, and I can see a use for him. But again, he's not an auto include.
You're right. I think it's the case with most of the characters for the White Scars. They're not auto includes, and that maybe plays into the way the Rights of War written about not having unique characters. But he does have his special weapon, which does have 2 profiles in a sense. It's a Strength 10, AP 2, unwieldy melee weapon with Brutal 2, Specialist weapon, Reaping Blow 1, and Hammer Hand. So it's a very strong weapon in itself, but what Hammer Hand allows you to do is to forgo all of your normal attacks and take a single attack at initiative step 10 with a strength 12 profile, AP2 melee, brutal 3. So can be murdering characters at initiative step 10 if you want to risk the single attack with your weapon skill 6.
Agree. That's a nasty attack. But again, it's a single attack, right? And yes, he's weapon skill 6, but in most cases he's hitting on 3s. Sometimes against another character, he'll be hitting on a 4. So it's a 50-50 chance whether or not you get that hit in. If you've got ways to mitigate that, such as, a chaplain is with him or something like this, and of course, obviously that changes the effectiveness of that attack. I would probably be using it more often at his regular initiative, at his regular profile rather than the single attack. But if I know that I have a way to get a pretty good chance of sneaking that attack through, it's going to wound most of the time. And that brutal 3 means that's 3 chances to fail, which is stronger than a standard brutal 2 on a Thunderhammer. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. Not bad at all. And I think if you stick him on a Jetbike, and maybe stick him, with another squad and to add to their killing power, like Goldenkeshig or even a regular Jetbike squad, yeah, he's useful. He's definitely useful. Now, he doesn't have to take all the extra Sisters of Silence if you don't want to. So you could use him that way, I guess. But he's not bad. Not bad.
Definitely one you have to convert up. But if you're looking at playing the White Scars, and let's face it, the White Scars tend to play very thematic and tailored lists, you'd again be building your list around some of these characters. You wouldn't be taking this as a generic, let's fill in a slot. It wouldn't work like that.
True. And the last thing, and it's just worth bearing because I've never said it in a single one of these kinds of reviews. When I typically talk about something being an auto-include, I'm thinking about it more from a strategic or game perspective, but I also rate things on fluff, conversion, model, these different kinds of things as well. So I think he would be a cool addition in a White Scars list for those reasons. He just is not probably going to be the biggest beat stick around, and that's okay.
Yes, we encourage people to play for the thematic and narrative as opposed to building the best and most unbeatable list in the Horus Heresy. It's more fun to see thematic based things, and especially on Far East Wargaming channel we've had some very thematic armies that aren't the most optimized but are definitely following a theme, and it makes a more well-rounded game. Well, that rounds up our review this Heresy Thursday of the 5th Legion of the White Scars. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I hope you have enjoyed it. If there's something we've missed or something that we have gotten wrong in our review, please let us know in the comments. We're happy to correct some of our viewpoints. These are our viewpoints. At the channel, we don't currently have a White Scars studio army, but I know it's something that is on Jason's to-do list, as along with every other legion of the 18 legions.
Yeah, added to the list. I actually do have a playable 3,000 point White Scars list. It's just not fully painted. It's not fully based. It's not ready to appear on the channel, but we certainly want to get one on the channel as soon as possible. But I also have about 3 other armies in various stages of progress as well. So hopefully we can get one of those on for you. And yes, absolutely. Just like Rich said, we love the comments. We love the interaction. It's okay to disagree, to challenge, to bring up something that we got wrong. We try to get as much right as possible, but hey, we're human. We make mistakes, just like I did with Furious Charge and Rage. So excuse me for that. But yeah, thank you for tuning in, for those that have been around this long, and definitely keep the interactions up.
Well, from us at Far East Wargaming, that's the end of our Heresy Thursday podcast. Tune in next week for our next Heresy Thursday podcast, and on Mondays we'll be releasing battle reports. So please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you get notified of our latest videos. We've said this in the past, we are growing slowly but surely, thanks to all of the great support from you guys, our viewers and subscribers. So we're thanking you for that. But from me, Richard, that's all for this week. Jason, any last words?
Nothing else for me. We just appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.